Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Rental License Program public meeting. Tonight is Thursday night, May 20th. My name is Michelle Lizey. I'm the Community Engagement Facilitator at the City of Red Wing. And we have a number of staff members and some guests, and we hope as many other people in the community can join either virtually on the screen or by phone. This meeting is also being recorded and it will be played back. So we hope that others can watch afterwards and ask any questions. I want to make sure we know that Dan Rognus is here. Dan Rognus is the Community Development Director at the City of Red Wing, and Dan will be guiding us through most of the meeting. Our building inspector, Frank Peterson, who has been doing that for years and years, is also here and can answer questions. We also, because this is a publicly noticed meeting, we do have council members here. The mayor may also be here. Council members are here to listen and to listen to the feedback from community members. Tonight is not a time when they will be engaging in dialogue. This is really for staff to present this program as proposed and to get as much feedback as possible. If after this meeting you would like to touch base with either any of us on staff or your council members, all of that information is on our website, and you can go to the Rental License Program page and you can reach any of us. As you might know, the city council members are also able to be reached either individually or all at once. So you can find that information and reach them after tonight. So before we start, we actually are lucky to have some guests from Three Rivers Community Action, because there is a program that is so important right now called Rent Help MN. And we know that it has been such a difficult year for landlords and for tenants. And financially, it's been incredibly difficult. And Three Rivers Community Action is one of the organizations in the state that is working as a navigator to help people get some of the funds that they need and can even help with applications. So I'd like to introduce our two guests, Pam Barrientos, and I just lost our second person. Can you please, I just lost it. I bet you will introduce yourself for us.
Hi, I'm Leticia Bravo, and I work with Three Rivers, and I'm also a co-lead on the Rent Help MN. And we
Great.
are, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead and you let us know when you want us to put the slide up so we can let people know how to get information. But we just appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having us. We can go ahead and put the slide up.
Okay.
Thank you. So we are helping families, and we're helping families apply for assistance through Rent Help MN. That's from basically the beginning, getting all their paperwork ready, letting them know what they need to apply, and then moving forward from there. So as soon as they get us all their documents, then we will go ahead and start the process on getting them to apply, and we help them along the way doing that. All they need is their ID. So any sort of identification, a lease or a contract from their landlord. If they don't have one, we can always provide a form that they can fill out. We also need a statement stating how much they owe and that they are behind. And then we need to know who's all in the household and income. And then from there, we go ahead and start the application once we have all those documents, and go ahead and start the process. And then what the good thing about them working with us is that we can always help them if something gets stuck or something comes back that they're missing on their application. So that's why we strongly advise that they apply with us, and helping them apply for 3 months forward at a time, and also linking them with their landlord on there.
And this program covers back rent all the way back to March of 2020. So the actual date is March 13th. So, and then it covers forward rent 3 months at a time, with as long as funds are available, people will be able to apply backwards and forwards for an extended period of time. Landlords also have to register. And so if you go onto the website, renthelpmn.org, you can see under resources, there's information for the landlords. We understand this is a difficult process for landlords, and we hope that whenever you see that we have an event open for tenants to apply, that you can also come and connect with us. And we hope to share that information with the city as often as we have the events. Because at those events, we will also have paperwork for the landlords, and we can connect with you by phone, especially if you don't have a computer, if you don't have internet. For most landlords, it's similar to making a Facebook page, but if you have difficulties, it's not very much advertised, but we're in this together because we know that we can't serve our tenants if our landlords don't get connected. If someone absolutely doesn't register and the tenant is the only one to register, you can still get payment. It just possibly would be delayed. The income limit for Goodhue County is close to $49,000 per year for one person, and then it increases based on family size. And so that means that a lot of the tenants that we see in our county are most likely eligible unless they have two very high income earners in the house or multiple adults that are all income earners. But I haven't seen anyone in my caseload or in any of the cases that we've touched to not qualify based on income. And it's measured in multiple ways. And then I think the biggest reason why we were selected and why we are providing services is because the process is a little bit more difficult for your tenants. And we know there's also sometimes a disconnect between the landlord and the tenant. This is a really neutral place where the tenant can get the information and someone holds their hand from start to finish and receives notices if they're missing paperwork. And so really feel comfortable sending us people. You can call that number, you can call our Zumbrota office, and you can look for us at pop-up events, and you can look for us really over for the rest of the year, because this funding will be available through the rest of the year. But the sooner that we can try to resolve these cases, the better it will be for us to plan forward and to try to rebuild as a community. We really respect and appreciate the landlords right now and everything that they've gone through. And so we are really here to thank you and to extend any even questions, because we understand that this program is a little difficult for the landlords because the information that's available is mostly only through this website.
Great.
Does anyone have questions on staff?
No, I think we'll make sure to have this information and to have some additional slides that you sent over today. We will put that on our COVID page tonight after this meeting so that people can also go to the city's COVID resources page and find this information. I think it's really helpful. Is there anybody from the audience? If you do have questions, we could take 2 minutes to take any questions. I'll just pause here for a minute.
Or Leticia, do you have anything else to add that we didn't cover?
No, I think we're okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Pamela and Leticia, we are so glad that you were able to join us, especially on relatively short notice. So thank you for making time to be here today, and you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. But we will definitely be also promoting this through the city's social media and, through our city beat and other ways that we can get the information out. Great. Okay, thank you. All right, then we will move on to the main agenda for tonight. We have about 7 different things. We've done our welcome and introductions. Dan Rogness is going to lead us through this agenda. We'll go through the proposed program timeline, which has shifted a little bit since we first started talking about this. Review the basic parameters of the program. Again, all of these have sort of changed in small ways over the months that we've been talking about this, and actually over the last 18 months. Next, we'll go over the inspection zones, then the annual license fee proposal, also the proposed checklist. And then we're really looking for comments, questions, and feedback on any and all of these things and additional things that may not be listed here from the audience. So we'll get right into it. Dan, we'll have, do you want Maceo to put up the first slide and we can maybe go through? Okay.
Yep.
We'll go through that proposed timeline. I'll turn it over to you, Dan. Thanks.
Thanks. So as Michelle said, I'll go through about 6 slides here. And the first one is the timeline, the proposed timeline. So May 24th is next Monday. That's when the council meets next. And staff will summarize comments from this meeting to the city council. On June 14th, staff presents the almost final details of the program, the rental license program, including the ordinance, and council provides time to listen to residents who want to provide feedback directly to the council. The council will not make a decision on that day. July 12th, we're proposing the council holds the public hearing and considers the first reading of the ordinance to implement the program. July 26th, a second reading of the ordinance, and ordinances in Red Wing require an introduction or a first reading and then an adoption, which is the second reading. In August, if the program is approved by the council, letters will go out to owners and renters explaining the program details, and we will provide approximately 5 months for owners to prepare, and it will give everyone time to get questions answered if they were not aware of the program before that. So January 1, 2022 is now the proposed start date of this program. And we'll show more about fees and so forth later. But the fees will start to be due and inspections will begin in January. The program's year is now a calendar year. Previously, we had talked about a July 1 through June, but we're shifting that now to a calendar year program. Reminder letters would go out each year to landlords in September or October, and that letter will remind landlords of the time frame of their next inspection. So we can go on to the next. So there's one page here of just the basic parameters of the program. And there's a lot more detail in the ordinance itself, but this really sets a general description of how we're moving forward with this. First of all, Red Wing has approximately 690 rental properties, and those properties include a total of about 2,500 rental units. Of the properties, so of the 690 rental properties, approximately 83% of those are 1 and 2 unit buildings. So again, by far, the majority are those 1 and 2 unit properties. And the larger units are 50 or more units, and we have 9 of those in Red Wing. The annual rental license would be issued again to all property owners each year, and health and safety inspections would be done every 3 years. Each owner would be charged a flat fee of $40 per unit per year, and we'll show that in more detail in a minute. License fees would fully support program operations, which would include 1 new staff person, and no tax dollars would be used to fund the program. So it's self-supporting with the fees. We have looked at some adjustment to the fees in 2 instances. And the first instance is for HRA public housing units. They would pay 50% of the fee. And that is really because HRA inspects these public housing units. And so the HRA will work with the city to provide documentation of those inspections to be in compliance with our program, our requirements. And then secondly, newly constructed units would not be inspected within the first 3-year period. So that fee would also be reduced by 50%. The owners or agents must be present for the inspection and notify tenants at least 72 hours before the inspection. And if you could move a little bit further down to the bottom of the page, I think there's one more. So the city would be divided into 3 zones, and I'll show a map of that. The most westerly zone is the starting point in 2022. And then we decided that buildings with 20 or more units we would have as a floating zone. And so those could be done as time permits within that 3-year time period. And I do note here also that staff anticipates working with rental property owners that may have multiple properties in varied zones, and we would work with them to inspect all of those at one time if desired by the owner. So they wouldn't have to necessarily, let's say they have some properties in all 3 zones, we could work with them to get that done in 1 year time period, or during that 1 year time period. So I think the next slide or the next page shows the map, a map of those districts that we talked about. And so the westerly to the left of the screen, the purple color would be the 2022 year. And then we'd move across. So the green zone 2 would be 2023 and blue would be 2024. And then we would continue again once they've all been initially inspected on an ongoing 3-year basis. And then you do see some red there that's referred to as zone 4. Those are the ones I referred to that could be floating and maybe be identified and inspected in a varied or within any one of those 3 years of that time span. Next slide. So the fees that we're looking at right now that have been most recently supported by the council's ad hoc committee, and we've had the council look at this as well. It has changed since we were in the library over a year ago, and that first column shows what we proposed over a year ago, and that's referred to as the previous fees. And that was based on a $100 per property, then another $25 per unit. That kind of system is very common among cities in Minnesota that have rental inspection programs. And we continued to look at that, but we looked at other options throughout this last year. And the option that we settled on to consider, it hasn't been approved yet, but we're considering this, is what we thought was the most fair fee structure. And that is a fee structure, again, that fully supports the program cost and becomes, rather than that 2-tiered fee system, just a 1 flat fee of $40. And so as you look down this table, you'll see varied units per property and how those look now compared to what we were looking at over a year ago. And in a nutshell, what you're seeing is those with smaller units are really saving from the proposal previously. Those with more units are seeing a higher fee than what we were looking at over a year ago. However, again, that last column on the right shows that we really feel this is the most fair because it's the same per unit cost. This shows what it would be per unit per month in addition to the per year cost. We will have some other fees for some penalties for not showing up at inspection, a second reinspection and so forth. You can see that. Those didn't change from the previous proposal. And again, these would be charged each year. And we would just get in a kind of a routine cycle of sending out those billings, and hopefully landlords, property owners would get used to that as well. Next. The next two slides are the rental inspection checklist. And we did make some changes and improvements in this as well. I won't go into that in detail. Some things we changed as a result of the fire marshal looking at that list and having a few suggested changes. We did have, excuse me, if you go down, you can just kind of scroll maybe slowly through this page and the next, and then I'll have you stop at the bottom of this second page. We did add two things in here related to, as we get down, here we go, the last two, G2 and G3. So any visible mold observed, we would want to provide information on how to address that mold. And then peeling paint, chipping paint is a potential for lead-based paint. So we wanted to have some check off on that, whether that has been observed or not by the inspector. And I think that we are at the end of just the basic information that we intended to provide this evening. And Michelle or Frank, I don't know if you had some additional comments you wanted to add before we turn it over for questions, concerns, comments.
I'm fine. Frank, did you have anything to add?
Nothing new to add. It's just if somebody doesn't have my phone number, if they have any questions, they want to talk to me personally or a phone call. My number for work is 651-385-3611, or you can call my cell phone anytime, 651-764-1770. And it's on the website also. But so if somebody wants to call and talk, not on the meeting here, they can call me separately.
Mm-hmm. And if you're ready, Dan, would you like to open it up now to questions and see if we have anyone on the line
Yes.
or anyone
Yeah.
in the meeting? Okay.
Yes, let's do that.
It looks like we don't have too many people who are joined virtually, and so you could either raise your hand physically, you could use the little, oh, I see Michael Holmes. Michael, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, can
Okay.
you guys hear me?
Yep, we can. Great. Go ahead.
I was just curious on when you guys were doing the mapping of all the zones, how did you determine zone 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, so we, I think, well, first of all, we had 3 zones that we wanted to end up with. And so we tried to do essentially a count of what in the 3 zones would essentially be similar from one year to the other. So we wanted to have the number in each zone somewhat equal from 1 to 2 to 3. And then again, we added, this wasn't done before when the program first started, but we decided with the larger units, let's try those as in that floating zone, as I mentioned. But it was more of a numbers exercise, and then showing that line between the zones based on an equal distribution of number to distribute the workload fairly equally from one year to the other. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. Is a copy of this map available?
We can put that new one on the website tonight so that it will be available. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? You can either raise your hand virtually with a little hand or just kind of speak up. You can unmute your microphone and speak up if you've got questions.
Michelle, I would just like to add so everybody knows too, that map's not 100% accurate, with the colors and locations. There are some errors on there, so it's not 100% accurate.
And when you're talking about zone 4 and a question that might come up from people listening later would be, those are the facilities that have multi-units in them. Can you talk a little bit about how, I guess you'd be planning on letting people know far in advance what year they would be, so that someone would know ahead of time if they were in 2022 or 2023, even though they are floating, right? You would kind of try to work that out to give people plenty of notice.
Give them plenty of notice and probably do a floor at a time or a certain section of the apartment building at a time and just work our way down as we can to fit it in as if there's some slow time for the inspector.
Okay. I know we also have some folks here from the HRA. So we have Corinne Stockwell and Jennifer Cook. Oh, and Reagan Kilbride. So if folks have questions also for the HRA and our partnership together. It might be good that we're going to eventually be away from these virtual meetings so we can get back in person. I'm going to wait a couple more minutes here. Must have some kind of questions.
Tell you who you are. Okay.
Yeah, my name is Delbert Johnson, and I got a couple of questions I want to maybe have addressed.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Delbert.
Okay, one of them is the water bills. You know, I've been in this rental business for over 30 some years, and I've always kept the water bills in my name in case the renters pull out, and they used to have, or they still have a deal where you can't turn the heat off on them. But I figure I had them where I could watch them with a water bill. But now they got laws that says that you can't shut the water off on these people. But the thing is, the Red Wing doesn't have any skins in this problem here. It's because their bills always come out 2 months late. And somebody's gone, then they get the bill, and then they never paid the bills. And now you guys come back and want us to pay them because otherwise you'll put it on our taxes. So we end up, the landlord always has to pay. Well, if you guys want to be in the rental program, you guys should have some skins into this thing. You guys should take care of the water bills and stuff like that then. And another thing I want to know is I signed up for this inspection, I think it was back in 2010 when they first started, and I paid a fee of $125 or whatever for my units. And I was wondering, it never went through, so am I going to be able to use that money towards my inspections if this thing goes through? And another question I want to know is personal property. People that live next to you. I got a house right next to me right now where I live. I moved into my apartment, in one of my apartments. So I try to take care of myself, but my neighbors don't take care of their stuff. And if you go around and look at their yards, if their yards are really bad, the inside of the house is worse. And you guys are going to inspect our places. You should inspect the personal people too. A good thing is if you look at their yards, that'd be a good example, a good chance to go out and do that. But I says, you guys are always on the landlords, but you guys, we don't get any, you want to add fees to us, but you don't, the city doesn't have any skins in the game here. And you guys should have to foot the bill for some of this stuff, like background checks and stuff like that. Why should their landlord have to do that? And then, like you say, I put the smoke detectors and I put the carbon monoxide stuff in. Well, geez, the renters, when they leave, they take the stuff with them. And then at halftime, they take out the batteries so the kids can play with their toys. That's not my fault. The renters, we can't keep babysitting these renters. The renters got to have some skin to do some of the stuff on their own, take care of themselves. This is why we have so many problems today. These people don't want to take care of themselves. They want somebody else to do it. I guess if you're going to have some more meetings, if I come at them, I want to be there too. So I see you had some dates there set up. So I got that wrote down here and there. We'll get some emails out and find out. So I guess that's some of my questions I'd like to have answered.
Delbert, I'll give you a call
Yeah.
tomorrow and I'll be able to answer some of your questions tomorrow, Delbert. I'll call you tomorrow.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, come on up to my house here, Frank, and then I'd like to have you go over some of that with me.
Sure, not a problem. I'll give you a call in the morning and let you know what time I have open tomorrow, okay?
Sure. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Great. Anyone else who has questions? Or topics they feel were not covered and they would like to have covered?
This is Dylan Holes, and I've got a question. I've inquired with Becky Norton several times to be included in some of the process and how things are coming along. We've also requested that some landlords be included in the rental committee. None of those requests have been acknowledged, and I was just looking for some explanation as to why it's been just kind of a dark process and there's been not a lot of transparency.
So are there things that you would want to have in there that you don't see in there? Is it Dylan? I want to make sure I'm saying your name right.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, Dylan. So we do want to have, as you know, starting in 2022, an annual, and if people want it, it could be biannual, twice a year, meeting of both tenants and meeting of landlords, so that we can start building up that type of one-on-one meeting where groups of people would get together and have face-to-face contact with the council, the mayor, and staff. We can hear, you know, concerns, questions, and that way also other tenants and other landlords can talk to each other. So we'd like to have that happen.
Well, I think as we can see on the people, the turnout that showed up for this call, that there's very few people that are on here, and it's definitely not a reflection of, you know, the major population in Red Wing, landlords or tenants on either side. And we had inquired back last year when this whole deal started, and there was, I'd be guessing here, but I would say probably 100 to 200 landlords sitting in the library. And shortly after that meeting, we had inquired Becky Norton, who is the only one that was president that's on this rental committee. I reached out to her 3 to 4 times. I'm sure she'd be happy to confirm that. And it had requested that we at least have some people. We had landlords that were interested in actually being involved in part of the conversation through all of this, and there's just zero response and zero transparency. And I just don't know how the city council is supposed to be a reflection of the city when they don't even listen. I mean, I read the meeting minutes from that library meeting last year, and I would guess that whoever it was that wrote it, I mean, it was so biased that everybody there was actually on board with it, and it wasn't even remotely like they were at the same meeting that all of us were.
So, okay, so I can respond a little bit to that. I'm the one who took the notes, and I can say that when I read it, I don't think there were, I got the opposite impression. We had
certainly a lot of
112.
opposition
Yeah,
at the meeting.
yes, there
I would
was.
say 95% of it.
There
And none of
definitely
that was reflected in the notes, that the majority of the people there were 100% entirely against it.
Yes, I would agree that people were very much had opposing views, and those I think were noted. But I will say there were about 112 people. You're right. It was very well attended. It was the night before things were shut down at COVID. We have spoken, and the council is aware of this, that if people feel like an event in the park at the beginning of the summer, once things are opening up, we are very open to doing that. I can tell you that having these virtual meetings is definitely not what the staff wants. It's the council and myself as the engagement facilitator. This is definitely not how we love to have public meetings. We are very open to having something in the park where we have big boards up and we can have one-on-one conversation. I can also tell you that if you have either you individually or a small group of people or large, email me, let me know, and we can do that. And I now think with things opening up, we can at least meet in small groups, potentially in a park in addition to a larger event. So it is not our intention at all. I totally understand how you feel that we have not had public meetings the way that we normally would because of COVID. That is, you are completely and 100% correct. We have had numerous council workshops on this. And if you weren't able to attend those or didn't know about those, I'm sorry about that, but we definitely do want to hear from folks. This is not something that we are trying to do in the dark. We want to be as transparent as possible because it's only in our best interest for everybody to know that this is happening and to get feedback so that we best know how to communicate with you and with everybody else. So
Well,
I
another
am sorry
question
that
that
you
I've
feel that
got,
way.
it's a little bit different from where we're at. Just out of curiosity, what is the reasoning behind mandating that an owner be present for the inspection? I mean, we have a lot of landlords that are from out of town, potentially even out of state. I mean, I know plenty of them that have one rental house here that they're working from out of state, and have opted to rent that house out. What's the thought process behind that? And also with that, if you're going to mandate that, are you guys going to have a city employee that's willing to work Sundays and into the later part of the evening? Is that something you guys are prepared to offer to these people that that otherwise work full time, have their lives going on, possibly live out of state? Is that something you guys are prepared to do?
We can pass that to Frank and to Dan, but I can say that it is noted that the inspector will also be very flexible, and Frank can speak to this as he himself does for Saturday mornings and really tries to work with the with the landlord's schedule. Frank, do you want to take that one a little bit?
Sure. When we did it the last time, Dylan, we were flexible on the meetings that Gene couldn't make. I did, evening inspections, some Saturdays, some Sundays. But for the most part, we're going to try to be flexible with the landlords. If it doesn't work for them to do it during normal working hours, we'll try to be flexible, and hopefully the new inspector that the city hires is going to be there too. And I think that's what we're going to, have on his job description, that he may need to work late in the evening or flex his hours.
And what is the purpose? Why is it mandatory to have an owner on? And this doesn't necessarily apply to me because I've got probably more flexibility than a lot of landlords, but just speaking on all of their behalfs, what is, I don't think that's reasonable, to demand or to require that a landlord be on site for the inspection.
I believe that's something we can maybe talk with Amy Mace and staff can talk about.
I was just curious,
know
what's the reasoning behind it? Why is that a rule? I don't believe that last time that was the case when we had spoken. So I was just curious why that was outlined tonight.
The last time it was we had to have permission from the owner and the landlord, but not both of them needed to be present. So we'll talk about that with staff and maybe the attorney and see, get back to an answer on you with that, Dylan. I'll call you back.
Okay.
I didn't come up with that, with this plan. I'm not a part of it, but I am a tenant. And I guess if I was going to say a reason behind that is to for accountability. I live in a building and it's run by a management company, and that management company, they hire people to come and do things, but when it's the rules aren't followed or things aren't held up, the owner never comes. Never do they come and check and see firsthand. So a lot of times I think it just can be, there can't be any discrepancies if the owner is there and they have to visually see the things that might be wrong, might be right. But I also think as a landlord, or when you take that on, that's a responsibility that you're taking on and an ownership. And I feel like, I realize that it can be inconvenient, but as a tenant, there's a lot of things that can be inconvenient too. And there's some landlords that just don't ever show up. And, and that's sad, and that's too bad. Some, you know, tenants or landlords are great, and it does go both ways because there's tenants that aren't great. There's, you know, but I just think for accountability and for them having to see it and take ownership and responsibility for something that they signed up to do and are doing. That's just my take on it.
Thanks, Anna. Did you have questions too, or I appreciate that viewpoint?
Well, one of my questions, I guess, was just, and I don't even know if this is on the right thing or not, but the building that I currently live in is also on a list for to be rehabbed. So there are quite a few things that are wrong with the building, or, you know, it's falling apart. It's an old building. There's maintenance things, there's things that are happening. I guess I was just curious to know if, you know, we have a checklist here for this program, if when they're doing this rehabilitation part of this, rehabbing this building, if, you know, I guess if landlords or the owners or whoever is doing it is going to have access to that too, just to make sure that they're doing, you're meeting those standards as well as whatever ones they have from other entities too.
So I think we've talked on staff, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, that we would send out that checklist along with those letters so that people would have in their hand. Is that what you're asking, Anna? If the
Well,
landlords
just
and
kind
tenants
of-
know ahead of time?
Yeah, and I guess just to make sure that they would look at that too, because I'm sure there's, you know, I live in an income-based housing building, and so rural housing development is part of it, and different stuff. So I know there's rules and regulations and different things. I just was, and if they have access to this, then I would assume that they would be looking at that too, to make sure things were up to par while they're rehabbing the building.
Okay, I see what you're saying. We could definitely, I think we can connect with those entities and make sure that they have that. That's a really good point. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Other folks? There's someone kind of coming in and out of your screen. Would you like to, do you have a comment? I don't know who that is. Okay.
So this is Brian Franchuk. I'm attending this mostly. I just bought a place in Red Wing, and it came with rental property, and I'm just trying to understand the process. And, you know, this is all new to me. So I'm, you know, appreciating everybody's, you know, input on the various sides of this. But, you know, personally, I know people that have rental property in other states, and it would be, you know, extremely difficult for them to get over there. You know, I mean, it's literally thousands of miles away. I'm kind of wondering if there are other ways to deal with the owner / management company issue if there were problems. But, you know, personally, my rental property is in my backyard, so it's not an issue for me. But I can envision scenarios where, you know, people wouldn't be physically able to really visit their rental property. But in those cases where, you know, there have been issues, you know, the rules could be, something could be done, you know, if the landlord has been responsive and the owner's been responsive through a management company, then, you know, I don't know if they physically would need to be there or not. But, you know, some of this stuff happens on a case-by-case basis.
And Brian, most of the landlords that are not in the area, normally they would have a management company or a representative to take care of their rental property as a maintenance person or a manager typically, to
Right.
take care of their problems when they are gone. So that person could be there in lieu of the owner.
Oh, okay. That's the part I didn't quite think was possible, but that would, yeah, that's exactly right. Because that is my scenario. I have home in Richfield, Minnesota, where I moved from, and I'll be renting it out. So that's kind of my scenario, for the Minneapolis area.
Hopefully that answers the question. But most people that live out of state that own rental property have somebody here that is their designated manager or management company.
Okay. Well, that makes sense then. Having to have the person directly there seemed a little bit, difficult for certain situations, but
Dan, you can correct me if
I
I'm wrong.
wanted to engage in the conversation just, because everything here is new for me and want to make sure I'm involved from the get-go.
Dan, I don't know if I'm correct or not in saying this, but previously it did say owner or manager, didn't it, in the ordinance?
Yeah, and I think I was looking for it. I'm pretty sure it says owner or their agent is,
Yep.
yeah, which is kind of a generic term there. Yep.
Mhm. Any other questions or comments or
What
areas where there might be
this is Dylan
confusion?
Bowles again.
Mhm.
What's your guys' plan of action for tenants who refuse inspection?
Yeah, there is some language about that. I'm looking for it
Mhm.
here.
Yeah, the ordinance does state that.
Yeah.
I mean, does a tenant have a right to privacy if that's their prerogative, or
No, I believe that the ordinance does say that the inspector does need to get in to inspect us for the health and safety
That's
parameters.
for that $500 fee in the fee schedule is renting without a license.
well, yeah, but you
Dylan.
can't penalize a landlord for a tenant's actions. I mean, in an honest world, you can't, at least.
We can
But I believe
probably take
states-
another, yeah.
We'll take a look at that, Dylan. I'll get back to you, but I believe state statute allows you as the landlord to invite an inspector into your property with proper notice.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but I think we know that in a perfect world that works, but that's not always the case that it's that it goes that route.
We might be able to take one more question, then come back to that one once we find once we kind of get the actual language here, because we'll want to make sure that you have that.
Is the $500 fee, is that a one-time fee, or how is that assessed each year then that you fail to rent without a light, or that you fail to get a rental license?
Well, if you're renting without a license, if you're found to be renting without a license, I believe that there is a certain period of time, like 30 days, that you have to fill out the license. I'll have to look at that. And Dan, Frank, jump in here. But if you, are you asking, Dylan, if someone refuses to get a license?
Well,
otherwise
it sounds like we're kind of walking down a fine line between, if you have a tenant that's not cooperative, and you've got, to the point where you just opt not to have it. I guess my question is, what is the worst case repercussion of that? Is it a one-time fee for that year of $500? Is there an ongoing fee that continues with it?
Yeah, my take on that is the $500 is an annual fee once a year.
But there also would be some stipulations. So my understanding is that you couldn't just pay that $500 every year and rent without a license. You know, right, Dan?
Oh,
I mean,
I see
a
what you're saying. Yeah,
license,
yeah.
a license is required in the city of Red Wing, the way that this is written right now. And so it's not set up so that someone could just pay a $500 check each year and rent without a license.
I see. Yeah, yeah.
Do you have concerns, Dylan, about tenants that you have that may or may not want to let people in?
I would say probably not so much. I have had tenants in the past that I even to get in to check furnace filters in the wintertime, it was like pulling teeth. And getting rescheduled last minute. I mean, 10 minutes ahead of time. And at this rate, it sounds like it's going to be on the mercy of the landlord, which I don't think is right. You know, if I had $1 for every time that a tenant pushes something back, potentially last minute, or you know, it's a fairly common occurrence in the industry, and with the reinspection fees, and you know, it's just kind of putting that burden on the landlord. So I'm just trying to figure out what worst case scenario is. I'm sure there's going to be other people that listen to this or are listening right now that probably are wondering the same things. Maybe don't want to ask it, and I don't have any intention of going that route personally, but I think that it should be outlined. I'd heard through rumor that there was going to be a criminal offense that went with it. I don't know if there's any validity to that or not, but I'm just trying to outline what all, you know, is entailed to this, and you know, what there is to expect, so that we can all, you know, have the most information that's available right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know that we did say that the tenant, right, the tenant is able to either be there or not, whatever is most comfortable for them. But they would not have to be there. So if they needed to push it back or felt like they needed to be there because they were at work, they're not required to be there, just the owner or the agent.
Well, most of the
That's
time
a good
they
point.
just don't want you in their property. I mean, it's not necessarily a reflection of you know, whether or not they can be there. I mean, it's been, you know, either they're embarrassed or, you know, their privacy. I mean, we're kind of through this rental inspection, whether it's, you know, whether the Supreme Court has ruled that it falls within the constitutional guidelines or not. I mean, the bottom line is that this policy in and of itself, which City Council should really think about, this is this is definitely a violation of people's privacy. I don't, all of you, everybody else that's homeowners here, if this was mandatory that the city could come through and inspect everybody's houses, the town would be on fire. So this certainly is, you know, whether it's legal or not is one thing, but I mean, it certainly is an invasion of people's privacy. And I don't know if city council's here. The last meeting, I think there was 3 of however many there are. So I'm sure they're probably not all on this again, but this certainly is, and that's something that I think that you guys need to tread lightly with. You know, there is going to be some problems with that. I mean, I've encountered it where, I mean, something as simple as looking at a furnace air filter, you know, going into the winter, where, you know, I had a tenant reschedule on me 3 times, and it was 20 minutes ahead of time.
Do you
And Frank and
oh,
Dan.
go ahead.
I
Jennifer?
have a question going off of that, kind of going on this idea. What is the time frame that can be canceled and not be penalizing the landlords? Like how close to the inspection is it that they will not get penalized? Because like he said, tenants do like to schedule. So I'm just curious on that part.
That's a good point, because I don't know that is something that we have dug into. Frank or Dan, is that something that we would probably want to make, you know, look at and then add to this? Because I don't recall that.
The last time we really didn't have that really happen too much. You know, there was a few times when somebody said they couldn't make it because they had to work late or whatever, and then they just rescheduled. But for the most part, it didn't happen very often than the last time. And with zone one, I think it may have happened only a few times that we had to do that, reschedule, so. And Gene was pretty, you know, working with the landlords at that time too, so he worked with them to reschedule the time.
I'll write that down. That Jennifer, with your work with HRA or just personally, do you see that as an issue maybe that we need to look into? Just curious.
I would think that needs to be addressed, kind of like Dylan was saying. People do sometimes wait till the last minute and say, oh, I think I have the flu or I have coronavirus or whatever it might be. So you might want to look to see, so that way the landlords also know that if I call you the day before, I'm not going to get penalized because my tenant's saying we can't come in because of some sickness of some sort, because that does happen.
Mhm. Okay.
Michelle, getting back to one of Dylan's questions, I don't know if this answers his question, but the ordinance as drafted right now has the city inspector attempting to, contacting and getting permission from the tenant of the rental unit to inspect that unit. Now, another option that's in here is it says the property owner may demonstrate to the satisfaction of the city enforcement officer that one or more tenants have been notified of and consented to the inspection. So it can be a direct contact by the city or a confirmation from the owner that the tenant has consented. That language is currently in our draft ordinance.
Mhm. And I think the question too is if the tenant does not consent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I know that we have that in here, so maybe we can
I was going to
get
tell you
that
too,
language.
a lot of leases have it in there. As long as you give notice that you're coming, you can go in. And we have had tenants before argue with us about going in, but as long as you can show that you have proof that you gave them the notice, unless you get really belligerent, we still work our way in.
Mhm.
So
And Jennifer, you're speaking as the HRA, correct? Doing HRA inspections.
yes, correct.
Okay.
I have done a lot of them.
Yeah. Do you have anything from your experience to share at all with tenants who, has that primarily gone okay when you show that you've got notice and you're able to get in?
Yeah, for the most part, and usually as long as you show and say that you did, you talk with them about it, usually you can get in, but we've never had a problem where we've ever had to not be able to get in or at least reschedule maybe once. So luckily on that part, I feel won't be too big of an issue, but could still be out there.
Okay. Does anyone have any other comments on the sort of tenant owner? I know it was requested that 72 hours be given in order to give tenants that time. Some cities require 24 or 48 hours, but Red Wing is proposing a 72-hour window there, minimum.
Hello,
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Delbert Johnson again. I got a question. You guys, are you dealing anything with eviction notices on this stuff? Because I've had a problem where I evict somebody and the renters, they know more than I do. So they say, you got to get a lawyer. So it cost me $500 for a lawyer to get him out of the house. Now, if you guys are going to be in the rental business, maybe we should be able to use a city attorney so we don't have to go out and get our own attorney for that. Is there anything addressed on that?
Dan? I don't believe so.
I don't believe so.
To be addressed.
So Delbert, you're
'Cause
saying
I
both.
still got I still got a couple that owe me money.
Okay.
I do want to speak. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
This is Pamela Barrientos from the presentation at the beginning of the meeting. I'm not sure if the gentleman heard the presentation. I do want to let the landlords know that this rental program, it is moving a little slow, but I know that we're right on the edge of those relationships with the tenants, but there is something that is important for landlords to know. While the tenant is still in the home, the back rent can be paid back to March of last year. If the tenant is no longer in the home, then they are no longer eligible for this funding. And so we are here to try to rebuild those relationships and at least try to make you guys whole and try to have them. We know that some relationships are beyond repair, but we also want you to know that there is a benefit of this state application of funding available to repay the landlords for everything that they've lost during this COVID period.
Thanks, Pamela. Delbert, are you talking about evictions that happened during COVID or pre-COVID?
No,
before
this is
that?
before. This is things that happened to me over the years, and I've always had to. I lost the money on the deal, and I still take them to court, and I got to pay all these fees, and then they say the judge gives you the thing that you win the case, and then the guy never pays. So really, the whole court system stinks with this because really, if a guy doesn't pay what he's supposed to be doing, he's contempt of court in my business or my word, and they should go after him and put him in jail if he don't pay his back rent and stuff. And then they trash the house before they leave. Because I had a house on Plum Street that was in a drug thing one time. And I ended up going to court, and geez, they fingerprinted me, and I was a culprit.
So I don't know if we can do, we can look into all of that. I do know that what we might be able to do also is just provide, more information and maybe easier, accessible information to both landlords and tenants. And we've talked about that with rights and responsibilities. And we're working this spring and summer to put together a real easy, some easy materials. I don't think that'll get at everything you're talking about, Delbert, but it would at least provide, I'm writing this down so that we could provide some information to landlords about evictions and those kinds of things, as well as to tenants. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other folks?
I had another sort of scenario that I had thought of. For example, let's say, there's tenants in a house and it's over the limit of how many people can be housed in there. So sometimes you have these big, large, old homes, and you can break them up into, a few different apartment settings. Say you get, when you're doing these inspections, you find that there's just too many people living in under this structure, and some families or a family is going to have to be removed or move. Do you guys have any plans, or are there going to be options or any help for people that might be facing being homeless because of that or something like that? I mean, I know that realistically, we'd like to think that there's not, but we do have homeless individuals too that are, couch surfing and staying with people, paying people money just to, stay there. But I was just thinking too about some of these places that have been made into different apartments, and that it might, because sometimes if there aren't rules, or if some landlords didn't have to follow them, sometimes it is just about money and how much can you get out of this property. So I guess I just was thinking about that a little bit, and if that ever came into play, is there any kind of help for those
Mhm.
people that would have to be, essentially evicted?
Mhm. And Anna, just so we understand your question, it sounds like, the concern about if someone has to, for any reason, has to leave that place where they're living. One piece it sounds like you mentioned is having too many people in one spot. And I do know that there was some language that was taken out because some people think that there should only be a certain amount of people per square footage, and other families are different. And some people think there should only be one child in one bedroom, and others, you can have 4 people in a bedroom. So so some of that language was taken out so that it is not too narrow. I just wanted to point that out so that multi-generational families can live in a place, and it's yeah, and we're not dictating how many people per square foot. But there is it sounds like what you're also saying is that the people could be asked to leave and not have another place to live, either because
Right.
someone is having to fix something major
Or for
something like
safety
that.
reasons, if there's too many people in a location, that's just more risk if there's a fire or if there's, something else happens. I just was curious about that if,
Right.
because it may not, if the landlord tells, the tenant, yeah, sure, move in, this is fine and everything. And if the family or whoever the people are, under the impression that it's okay, they could sort of be, innocently breaking rules or whatever, and then having to be evicted. So I just was kind of wondering about that. It might be a totally off scenario, but just something I thought about.
Well,
Frank?
Dan, do you want to touch base on that, or should I?
Yeah. Yep, I was going to do that. So there's instances that come up that are, I think, kind of get at what you're talking about. And here's a couple of them. So in the zoning ordinance, the zoning ordinance really regulates housing units in different zones. And so we would say a single family is permitted here or a duplex is permitted there. When we say that, they're referred to as housing units. They're not owner occupied or renter occupied. However, we do say a household in a housing unit is limited to 5 or fewer unrelated individuals. So we have had complaints where somebody says, I think my neighbor has 10 people living there. And so that would become a zoning enforcement process. It's not followed for right or for wrong with a process of if that creates homelessness as a result of that or not. It does become a zoning enforcement effort. And the other example is if somebody in a single family home we discover is renting part of that house out, and they weren't allowed to be a 2-unit household in that zoning district. So that in that case, they would have a illegal rental unit there. So again, that would result in zoning enforcement. So, you bring up a good point about, is there a way to do some kind of follow up in conjunction with that? There's not currently anything in place, but that happens off and on every year, those kinds of enforcement actions.
I find that's helpful information, though. I didn't,
Anna, we'll make sure to record that, though, to list this as something that we need to look at. And maybe we can do some more thinking here. Yeah.
Is that what you were thinking too, Frank?
Yep,
About
exactly.
that? Yep. Okay.
I was just going to mention to Anna too that, a family, if there was a family of 8 or 9, we wouldn't really, it's not a zoning violation, then it's a permitted use there.
okay. That's good.
Yeah, I guess I failed to say that. If you have a very large related family, that's okay.
Yeah.
In a single housing unit, yes.
Yeah. Others?
Just for the record, can you tell me which city council is part of the meeting here tonight, and of the rental inspection committee that's composed of, I think, 3 city council members, which ones of those are also present tonight, please?
So I can do that, I guess. I see on the screen that we've got Becky Norton, Aaron Buss, Evan Brown, Kim Bisey, Dean Hove, and I think I got everybody. Let's see. The first year, our ad hoc committee was Becky Norton and Dean Hove and Aaron Buss. And since this has been going on past COVID, at the new year, the new ad hoc committee is Andy Klitsky and Aaron Buss. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm just glad to see that we've got more participation with this meeting than we did the initial. I think we only had 3 at the original meeting last spring, and of the committee itself, I think there was only 1 present. So I'm glad to see that we've got more interaction this time around. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And just to note that the council has had numerous workshops. You can find that on the webpage. All the meeting recordings, all the meeting minutes and documents and materials are on the webpage and under the proposed rental license program page. There have been numerous meetings, regular meetings, and workshops where all council members were in attendance and have discussed this. So just want to make that clear.
Yep, I just think that we can all agree that we had the most community interaction at the initial meeting there in the library. So that's all I was getting at.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we will look forward to that as soon as COVID opens up. Some of these, kind of had to be in a different environment over the last 14 months. It's just the way it is. So we're really looking forward to getting back to the way it was.
Michelle, I think I did have one more thing to respond to one of I'm sorry, Dylan's question. And I'm reading from the draft ordinance. It says, if the city is unsuccessful in securing consent for an inspection pursuant to this section, the city shall seek permission from a judicial officer through an administrative warrant for its enforcement officer to conduct an inspection. And that is assuming some of the previous information I had provided was not successful.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. And we will have the updated ordinance and maps and all the materials on the proposed rental license program page so that you can look at all that. And there will be a public forum type of situation at a regular council meeting where anyone who wants to address the council on these issues is more than welcome to do that. Okay. Dan or Frank, any last words?
Yeah, I'd like one more question. Delbert Johnson. I would
Mhm.
like to know of all these people that are on these committees here, if any of them are involved with rental property. If they own anything. Anybody that's on the committee or the city council. Can you put that in your minutes too?
Yeah, I can, and I know the council is not answering questions, but there are renters and there are tenants. I'm sorry, there are tenants and there are landlords.
Okay.
Yes.
I know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We'll make sure that we have also the city council contact email information on that page. Frank or Dan, anything else?
Nope, not from me. Thanks.
Okay. All right, well, it's 7:45. We'll have these materials up also, and we appreciate everybody who came tonight. This is not a, it's still a work in progress. And so if you have comments or questions to share with any of us, please do. And for now, I guess we'll say good night and appreciate everybody taking time tonight to spend with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you.